Hello, and welcome to Magic is Real, a podcast focused on exploring the fascinating world of near-death experiences, communication with spirit, and all things metaphysical and spiritual. The mission of this project is to share messages of hope and inspiration with others, and to spread the word that death is only an illusion. Thank you for being here with an open heart and mind. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Hello. Welcome to Magic is Real. This is a podcast where we talk about afterlife, metaphysics, near-death experiences, mediumship, and I'm so glad you're here today, whether it's your first time or you've been here before. Today, I have my friend, Louisa Peck, with me. She is a person. She's a near-death experiencer, but she's a mountaineer, she's a dancer, she's a writer, she's a writing coach. She's a multifaceted human being who's had an extraordinary experience. And I want to welcome you today and thank you so much for being here, Louisa.
Well, thank you, Shannon, for asking me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. I always start off and say, I'm so excited because I always find these conversations to be so rich and um, eye-opening and heart-opening. But this, I'm very eager to speak. I'm very eager to speak with you because your story resonates with me so much as I am a recovering addict, um, feel very much in recovery, but I have such an interest in that topic and also helping other people heal through sharing our stories of hope and inspiration. So I'd love to start with learning about who you are, what your life was like before your near-death experience, and what were perhaps your spiritual beliefs. Anything you'd like to share about that, I'd love to hear.
Okay, well, I'll start by saying that I'm sober 27 years, and I get very choked up when I talk about it, just like that, because I really feel that the spirit world saw me heading down totally the wrong track and just waved and put things in my way, and until I finally got sober. And it's such a gift, and it just keeps growing, like my life sort of seen through the the grid work of the 12 steps. Maybe I'm just saying that because of your studio, but but it gives me a model for living and standards for living that I can keep checking on myself to see how I'm doing, and I keep growing. But so I was born into a family. My dad had religion shoved down his throat when he was young, and then he got a full scholarship to Harvard and promptly decided anything to do with God was BS. My mom came from a very difficult childhood with super talented people. Her father was a brilliant violinist, Elias Breeskin, and her mother was super famous art historian, and she got the short end of the deal. They divorced. She was she I just want to say, I think raising children did not come very naturally to her. So I grew up with this great big hole in my God-sized hole in my chest is what we call it, and just trying to fill it in various ways and trying to excel and trying to be smart. And I had a natural kind of spirituality when I was little, that I felt so many people do when they're little, to do with just the sky and the trees and the wind. And I just sensed something there and sensed that it loved me. But my father kind of shut all that down because he was very much, a post-enlightenment guy. And so I went to school and I excelled, and I took a lot of philosophy and wrote a lot of proofs that God does not exist. Not a lot of them. I shouldn't say a lot. I wrote one like disproving Descartes' proof of God, and then I wrote my senior thesis on the fall of God as a way that freed up modernist literature. That like people had been stuck in this little template of how to live with the Anglican Church, and uh, that I use Joseph Conrad, who eventually came to say that the universe is just a machine with no mind, no heart, going nowhere with no point. And so it seemed to me, because I loved alcohol and cocaine so much, that just feeling good now was the best that I could do when I wasn't proving my self-worth academically. So I was just partying a lot, and I'm pretty much lost. So what makes me so different from a lot of other NDEers is I had this NDE. I didn't get as far as many people, but I think most people faced with the choice I was afterward would have been like, okay, now I know there's more and I'm going to follow this. But for some reason, I thought that meant I'd have to stop drinking. That meant I'd have to be churchy. That meant I'd have to like abandon my whole sort of new wave personality that I like to think had at that time. I looked really different. And I just wasn't ready to do that. And so I had already had a compulsion as a child, and I mean as a teenager, and I had learned how that you can just say things don't exist if you want to. And so I kind of just said, I'm going to say this near death experience never happened, and I'm going to go on exactly as before.
That is so interesting. And I can tell why you're a writer. You have such a beautiful way with words and speaking so succinctly, because that says so much. You just said so much in such a short amount of time. Um, yeah, so that is so interesting. And I do relate so much with that, just trying to make yourself feel good now. And that as I mentioned to you earlier, I, as a sex and love addict myself, um, which I was addicted to validation and other people's approval and needing to someone else to make me feel okay, but then always going for the person who wasn't able to give me that to reinforce the fact that I was not lovable. And there was that hole always inside of myself. And I think that my one of my theories, I'm not saying I'm right, but something I've always thought about, is that all addictions stem from the lack of self-love, and but the God-sized hole is that lack of spiritual, not spirituality, but that lack of connection with God, with everything that
Oh,
is.
it's
Yeah.
because God's love for us and our own love for ourselves are inseparable because we are sparks of God. We are love. And anytime I was looking outside myself for that missing piece, I wasn't going to find it. I too had some SLA issues because I was always like establishing a crush, chasing that person. And when I would finally bag them, when I would finally get that person and make them fall in love with me, they'd lose all their magic. And I would need to find a new person to chase. And I repeated that cycle 3, 4 times.
Yeah, you're always chasing the fantasy because it's easier to fantasize than to actually
And
sit with
actually,
what is.
that stopped when I got sober. They both stopped. Yeah, the drinking and the chasing the crushes, because
Yeah.
I finally learned to start to get honest.
Yeah, me too. I love that. So yeah, let's talk about what led to your NDE, and you can just kind of
Sure.
talk about how it
Sure.
all went down
I'll
for
always
you.
tell my NDE, I've done a few of these things now, but I'm always happy to do it. And I always say it's like, I just almost in my mind, see, I'm going to put the needle on the record, on an old LP record, and you just let it go and it tells itself. It's very cool.
Yeah.
And I go there, and all the details come back to me. So to keep it short, I had gone to a nightclub in Manhattan. I was with a cocaine dealer who was my date. We did all that cocaine, and then we were looking for more, and someone told us someone was selling it in the club. So we bought from him a gram or something, and we put it on our gums, and it numbed our gums. And so we started snorting it, but my date said, this is doing nothing for me. I'm not getting high at all. And I had to admit it wasn't doing anything for me either. But I just had hope. Maybe if I snort the whole pile, I'll get a little bit high. I just thought it's bad cocaine. I didn't know until many years later that it was lidocaine.
Oh my
And I think, there was a basketball player who died around the same time. I can't remember his name. And River Phoenix died around the same time. And I often wonder if they got lidocaine laced cocaine as well, because it will lead to a cardiac arrest. So in my case, it took a little while. I went to the bathroom and I began to feel tunnel vision. I had a big band of sort of red, orangey, blinky stuff at the periphery of my vision. And it was, that band was getting thicker and thicker, and what I could see was getting smaller and smaller. But I was just such a little twerp that I was like, cool, I'm getting some wicked tunnel vision. And I just wasn't scared. And I remember even thinking in the bathroom, like, I'm finally cool. Like, I can just
Yeah.
remember thinking that.
Yeah.
And, but then when I got in the stall, I couldn't read any of the graffiti. I just, you know how some graffiti is not regular characters, but all of the graffiti was not regular characters. And so I knew something was not right there. And I came out and I began to feel like I couldn't breathe. And I found my date and I said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And I didn't understand why he wasn't panicking too. It felt to me like everyone should be panicking that there was no air in this basement. It was called the Peppermint Lounge. The lowest floor was the new wave, and it was the coolest. But
Mhm.
anyway, he just said, let's get the bartender, or let's get you a drink of water. The bartender gave me a glass of water. I did not want it. But to please them both, I took a sip. And that's when I had a grand mal seizure. I would say that my heart was going slower and slower. The lidocaine was depressing my whole autonomic nervous system. Um, so at a certain point, I just stopped beating altogether. So I had this grand mal seizure, banged everything all over the floor. The next day, they had so many lumps and bumps on the back of my hands and everything. I mercifully don't know anything of what happened then. And the bartender did CPR on me for 3 minutes. But those 3 minutes lasted a whole lot longer for me. So the first thing I thought was that I hit my chin on the bar. I thought I felt something there. I don't know if it was like the first jerk of the convulsions or what, but it seemed to shoot me up in the air out of my body. And I felt the sense, a very short sense of Manhattan just disappearing below me. And I was stoked. And I had a sense of, I'm going to leave all that nonsense behind. And I meant everything to do with my life and who I was. I just didn't, I was free of that. Like if you had a big costume for a play or something and you finally got to take it off, that's how I felt. And so I was shooting up into the blue sky and just had this sense of air and freedom, which is what I had been craving. And then I got this idea that I could bend back and do a back bend and a swan dive. And I pulled it off. It worked. And I was stoked about that too. And I was 22 years old and a ballet dancer, pretty good ballet dancer at that time. But anyway, my spirit does this back bend, and then I dive down towards the ocean. And I actually thought about whether it would be like concrete, but I wasn't afraid. I had absolutely no fear. I just was curious to see what would happen next. And I hit it, a perfect dive, went way down, saw beautiful bubbles around me, blue, and the blue light up above me. And I had a sense of like, it's a long way up. I hope I can swim. But then I was instantly at the surface because none of it's not real water. It's not real anything. But I do think now that it's interesting that I went through air, through water, then I saw land and I wanted to be there and I was there, and then saw a structure and wanted to be in the structure. So it's sort of, I know a lot about NDEs now. I'll try to keep my NDE pure to just what I thought at the time, but I can't help saying that now I know that people talk about passing through layers. And for me, I think there was this air, water, land structure that were like different elements and different layers of the other side. So I wanted to be on the beach, and I don't have any memory of swimming. The next thing I knew, I was wading out. And it was a northwest beach with barnacles and whatnot. But down the ways, I saw a mesa, and there was an old weathered house up on the mesa. It was like it had once been painted sort of sky blue color, but the paint was really old, and everything about it was old. And so I knew it had something to do with me, and I was delighted to see it. And so I'm instead of being at the house, I'm at the bottom of the mesa, but instead of being like it had looked like earth, now it was rocks, and they had this gross slime all over it. I didn't smell anything, but I was grossed out by the slime. And I just thought, okay, I got it. Like, just buckle down and get through this if I'm going to get to the house, and I can do it. I again had the same faith I had in myself that when I did the back bend of like, I'm going to climb this. I can climb stuff. So I climbed, but when I reached the door sill, I had lost my body, and I was right at the door sill. Like, instead of standing in the doorway, I'm right at the door sill. And I kind of thought like, oh, why is this happening? Like, what's going on? But I didn't, what do I want to say? It didn't seem all that weird to me that I had lost my body. It was kind of like, how annoying, I lost my body. But I again felt like I'm not going to let this stop me. So I passed over the door sill, and I was like a sort of like a subjective camera, super, super close to this wood that had been walked on so much that it was almost like velvet or something. It was, I don't know if you know what wood gets like if it gets walked on a lot. It's the fibers start to stand up, and that's what I could see. I could see every grain of it. I could see, beyond the boards. I was so close to it. And that's when I understood that this was the house of my ancestors. And I had never given my ancestors a second thought, but now it just rang like this gong in me, like, I'm here where we all pass. And I was super excited about it. I was super excited and felt all this love for my ancestors. And I'll just butt in present day Louisa a little bit now to say that I think the reason that we see relatives in our NDEs rather than, people that we've been close to is that we're like leaves on a tree. And my ancestors are the ones who have kind of passed down the spark to me, and it's been passed down to the next. And it is like a family tree, and that the people who are closest to you, who gave you life, are the ones you're going to see first. And so the same spark that is in me was in my grandfather and my great grandmother and all of these people. And that's why they were the closest to me in that house. So my grandfather on my father's side died before I was born, and he was the presence I felt most excited about meeting me. And he was really like, can't wait. Like, nobody's like, oh, too bad you died. They're more like, can't wait, get to see you. Like, so glad you're here. And I felt excited too, but I was alone. I didn't see anyone. I could feel them, but I couldn't see them. And then furthermore, there was supposed to be this armchair that I knew they all sat in that faced the big picture window that I saw. And I knew that they would sit there and enjoy the sunset. And there was no chair. I was only this high. I was like out of luck. And so I just had this feeling like, I want to see the sunset. And that's when something grabbed me by my sternum, though I didn't have a body. I wasn't aware of any body. You still have a sense of where your heart is. And it put like a tractor beam on my heart and pulled me across the floor. And I very much had a feeling of, whoa, this is kind of freaky, but it's fun. And then up over the windowsill, and I was getting more and more surprised as it happened, and then out the window, and then I was flying over the water. And it swooped me down close to the water. I was just flying over the water, and there was a brilliant sunset all around me. And I was whooshing forward through space, and I felt such just joy and elation and excitement, like the most a person is capable of feeling. Then I had an interrupting thought, which was, wait a minute, people can't fly. And then I thought, is this a dream? Is this real or a dream? And I didn't expect anyone to answer, but there came this answer with a kind of a deep resonance in me that said, more real than anything you've experienced. And it meant sort of like back there. And I kind of had to like agree with it. Like, it is. I know you're right. I know it is more real. But I didn't really have a sense of dialogue yet. Although, so then the sun was getting bigger and bigger. And I began to think, what's going to happen? Am I going to hit it? And I didn't really feel afraid, but I did have that whoa sense. And then I passed through this filament and I was inside the sun. And it was just brilliant white light. Does not hurt your eyes at all. It just soaks through. You become of it. And it is love. It's just love. And it's love that is indescribable in its intensity, and it just makes you complete, as you never are complete on this earth. And I became aware of a presence that was holding me, and I believe it's the same one that had spoken to me as I was traveling over the water. And it was, I called it the parent for a long time. It was holding me like a baby and pouring love into me. And I almost felt like it was sitting cross-legged on a floor and holding me. I had this sense of us being like this unit together of intense love. And I loved the parent. And I also want to say that the love from the parent, like there's the love around me in the white light, but the beamed love from the parent was for me specifically. This being knew me as no one on earth knows me, and knew my essence and loved that essence and just wanted me to feel that and poured it into me. And I felt, I think I had some awareness of my past life because I was just starving for that, and to just like finally get everything that I ever wanted. Then the parent says, you can't stay, you're not done. Like, it's gone. Just that sudden, just that sudden. It went from everything I've just been describing to black, and a little sense of dropping and falling. I was first just aware of like saying no and screaming and putting up this huge fight. I wanted to kick the parent in the shins. I wanted to throw a big tantrum and show him that he couldn't do this. I didn't think of him a he yet, but that I would not put up with this, that I was someone you have to contend with, and I'm staying in the light. And I felt a little after message of, case closed, honey, you're going back. And then I felt a slight sense of falling in the darkness. And then I felt a slight sense of fear because the parent was lost. If you had, I almost had the sense of like reaching up with my soul for the parent and no one being there. And it scared me. So next thing I know, I see these little chalk figures that are playing, and they're super cheerful. It's like they're in the blackness. They're drawn on the blackness, and they're like playing and doing these. They have the teeter totter. They have swings. They have all of these just playground things, and they're saying little silly things like, "How many hippos in a hopscotch?" And they're just. I mean, I can't remember the actual rhymes, but they were little rhymes, little nursery rhyme type things. And I just thought, well, this is not nearly as good as the light, but it's, the parent has given me this to like, I'll watch it like TV for until I get to go back. That's what I kind of thought. So I was watching it like TV, and then one of the faces got closer and filled in solid and white. And I was like, I wanted to see around to see what was going on with the swing set and all. But then I recognized he was speaking to me, and he was saying, how many fingers? And then, what is your name? And then I realized I didn't know it was the bartender. I knew it was a human. And I remembered being alive. And I was super, super bummed because what bummed me out was that he had to speak to me and he wanted me to speak back. Whereas with the parent, it had all been telepathic, zero effort. You just think it and it's understood. And he wanted me to like make these burpee noises. And I had this sense of like, if my brain and my eyes were an apartment and the garage underneath had my tongue in it, and I had to somehow make the garage door open and make the tongue talk. Like, that's how far away it felt. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know, I don't want to do that, you know. But he was real persistent, and I could see that he was kind of, he had some stake in whether or not I answered him. And so I did, and I managed to say 3 and Louisa, and I was pretty proud of myself for that. And then I'll just kind of hurry through this part, but I saw that there was a big pool of water around me. And I thought that they had dumped water on me. That was my idea, was that to revive me, someone had dumped water on me, but that was actually all sweat, which often happens if a person has a cardiac arrest and dies, that this huge amount of sweat comes out. But I have a lot of questions now about, well, first of all, I know that the rage I felt was not real rage. What it is that when we're in our bodies, we are sealed energetically. And a cell, a cell in any living organism is water-based, and it is surrounded by what you call a hydrophobic sheath, something that repels water, so that the cell can maintain its independence. And I feel that energetically we are of God, and we have a God phobic sheath of sort of anger and fear that keeps us in here. So for a lot of indie ears, when they are passing back through that, not everybody, but a lot get rage. And it's just kind of like, as you're passing through, you feel the rage, and then you're back in your body. It's strange that I mean, it fits for me anyway, that theory. So in any case, I did, my brain was back online, but not fully. So I was about experiencing things like a 5-year-old. I didn't have any sense of like, phew, that was a close one. I was like, oh wow, that was fun. And and I was kind of like, who are all these people? There was like, you know, huge crowd around everybody in the nightclub, and or at least on the new wave floor. And we all went up the stairs together. And I guess they were just kind of, a lot of people wanted to see what would happen. I don't know, but I just had a sense of like, oh, like we're on a field trip. We're all going upstairs. Okay, I'll go. And I went, and we sat on a bench outside the Peppermint Lounge, and I didn't really even know we were waiting for the ambulance or anything. And I was back to smoking cigarettes and back to being cool in my fishnets and high heels and all. And the bartender came over to talk to me, and he said, "You were gone for a long time." And my date said, "I thought you should give up. I couldn't stand it anymore." And he told me later, he said, "You were gray and you looked like a morgue thing. You did not look like yourself." And he was pummeling you all over the place, and I just wanted it to stop. And he didn't say that then. He told me that later.
Yeah.
But anyway, I didn't really understand at the time, and I just said, "Wow, huh? Wow, look at that." And I didn't really even thank him, and that's been a great regret for me in the years since. But I eventually figured out that we were waiting for an ambulance for me, and I wasn't having it. I was not having my parents find out that I had done cocaine, that I had died. I was not having them. I mean, I'm 23 years old, and I did not want them to know. And so I just said, "Please, please, can we just go?" So there were all these cabs right in front of us, a row of them. And so he just grabbed my hand, and we jumped in a cab, and people ran and banged on it. And again, I didn't have any sense of why, because they were like, "You need to go to the hospital. You were dead," you know, but he drove us away. Or my date said, "Drive, drive." And he took off. And there's more to that story. I remember him saying, "Do you know where we are?" And I said, "I do." And he said,
Yeah.
"Okay, so where are we?" And I said, "We're in a cab." And like what
Right.
he meant, what streets we're on or whatever. But
Yeah.
anyway, the next morning, after I had an exchange with my roommate, I had this moment of truth sitting alone in our little one bedroom apartment. I was in the little bedroom, and I can remember staring at this little night table, one of those little mini night tables, and at the dust and stuff at the bottom, and thinking, remembering the love and remembering that moment of, is this real, more real than anything? And I just made that choice. I saw two roads. I saw churchy Louisa, which I would never be, and I saw just say it didn't happen, Louisa. And I said, I'm going that way, and I did.
That is so fascinating. And I could see how someone like us, who were people who were looking for that escape, that experience must have been like the most, like the most fun, like the best trip ever, and also the best date ever. That's so fascinating. And so much to, yeah, so you just went on with your life.
Mhm.
I won't, I have more questions, but I want to sort of bridge it with what happened after that. In terms of your, you're
Yeah.
continuing
Okay.
to, yeah, you're
So there were
continuing to use, yeah.
these are the weird paranormal events that kind of forced me to eventually become the weirdo that I am today.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, like kind of how you go from I'm pretending that never happened. I'm going to
Right,
keep living the way I'm living
right,
to it's always an evolution, right? And recovery is always a
right. Well, the
evolution,
first
but
one was 5 years later. I had not made any progress spiritually. I was an aerobics instructor. I had my master's degree in writing, but I was an aerobics instructor in Boston, and I was at a party, and I went for a walk on the beach, and I saw a ghost, and I didn't know what to do with that. And I mean, I didn't even know it had to do with a near death experience that I was able to see this spirit, but I decided I'm going to shut that away too. Then I had a premonition, another 5 years later, that my unborn nephew was going to die, that my brother was going to be plunged in grief. And I knew this so strongly, but I didn't feel I could tell anyone because I didn't know how or why or anything. And when it came true, I felt ashamed for having known and just shoved that in too. And so then I got sober because my angel freaking yelled at me. Um, I I drove home super super drunk from a party. People had taken away my keys. People had put me in a bedroom of some house, but I found my keys, and I somehow found the ignition, and I somehow drove speeding home. And I came to a place where the road passed over railroad tracks and got narrower for the bridge. And there were these reflector signs on both sides. And I, at that point, was ready to die. And I had drunk myself to a point where my life was a mess. I was a mess. We call it incomprehensible demoralization in AA. And I had reached that stage. So it seemed to me the easiest thing would just to be to crash my car and die. I didn't think about all the other people on the road. But anyway, I just said, I have no idea which of these many reflectors that I see is real, and I'm just gonna shoot down the middle. And I did. And um, I remember that so clearly. And then I got to my house, which was a log cabin out in the country. My partner had left me because of my drinking. And so I had it alone. I couldn't afford it. I was going to have to sell it. But anyway, I got out of the car, and I couldn't stand without hanging onto the door, but I was hanging onto the car door, and it looked up at the beautiful sky of stars. It was clear and cold. And I thought, man, I'm such a badass when I drive drunk. And then that's when he did it. He shot this thing down from the stars, threw me into the ground, and it said, "This is the last time I can help you." And it was that same deep, resonant knowing that had been with me in the light. And And he said, and you do know right from wrong. Because I had been writing in my journal, it doesn't matter if I fling myself at this person or do this other thing or get drunk or deprave myself in various ways. It doesn't matter because there is no point. And so the angel was saying, you do know right from wrong. So again, I'm letting in some of, I didn't know what it was then. I was like, what
Right.
just happened? I had no idea, but I felt this deep shame because I knew that I did deep down know right from wrong, way deep down. And I understood that this voice was saying, I got you through that railroad crossing, and I'm not doing that for you anymore. If you want to kill yourself, have at it. You want to throw away your life. And so I didn't get sober immediately. It took me another, so this happened in sometime in November, and my birthday is January 29th. But let's just say that it really took kind of the fun out of getting drunk all the time when
Yeah.
you heard someone say you do know right from wrong, you know. um
When that happened, you said it, you recognized that energy as the energy that had held you on the other side. Would you say was the voice audible to you, or was it more of the way that I, as a medium, I hear
yeah, it wasn't
it's my own,
audible.
right. It's in your own,
It
it's,
wasn't
well,
audible, and yet it has a depth to it.
right. That's not your voice.
Yeah, well, it's not any voice. It's just if thought had a bass.
I was going to say a resonance. Like
Yeah.
just for some reason, I just felt that, like
Yeah,
a
that's what it's
vibration.
like. If thought had a bass, it would be a deep based thought.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
and that was the first time he spoke to me, and now we speak to each other. It's been many years later. So I got sober. Um I I think I've told this one a couple times. What I want to tell is a different one because I've never really told this one about it's hard to tell. I'll try to tell it as quickly as I can at the experience that made me stop doubting. Because what would happen is I'd have a weird thing happen, very intense. Around my sister's death, it was extremely intense. But then again, it would just kind of be like, I don't know how to live in the world with that model. The only model I know is materialist science. So I just can't keep going about my day believing that there are spirits and ghosts and I have an angel with me. And yeah, I just can't do that. So I would just kind of get rid of it. And then, so one night I was sort of coming to the end of my relationship with my partner, though I didn't really know it. I knew that she was bouncing a million checks, that her attention was elsewhere. I didn't know that she was having an affair. She hadn't actually started the affair yet. It was just kind of laying the ground for it at that time. But I had a dream that I was in the house where I lived when I first met her. And in that house, there was a gigantic spider in a plant. And I decided to be brave, and I asked someone to bring me a glass, and I knocked the spider into it, and it lay on its back, the bottom of the glass, and showed me its belly, which was all these interlocking triangles and diamonds of beige and gray and browns. And I had the thought in the dream, like, so much design, even on something as simple as the belly of a spider. And I had the thought, diamonds of orderly precision. And the next morning, I had my toddler on my hip. I was late for something, and there's this notebook I'm supposed to pick up, and I've got the diaper bag, and we're just getting my keys so we can get out the door. And I look in the computer room, and above the computer where I sit, there's this black ping pong ball on the ceiling. I'm like, what the heck is that? It's black ping pong ball. And I set down my toddler and I walked closer, and it was the biggest freaking spider I'd ever seen in my life. And this soul exchange went on. I said, why are you here? And why are you right above where I sit? And it answers, I'm here for you. And And I felt that in my soul, but my head is going, oh no, the spider, oh, I thought like that. It couldn't be doing both at once, right? And so I thought, well, I was brave in the dream. I'll be brave now. I thought that's a little weird, but okay. So I get a glass. I go up on the chair, I get the spider, I cover it, and I ran out the door. And I thought, this spider is so freaking big. I'm not even putting it in my yard. I'm taking it to my neighbor's yard. So I threw it in my neighbor's. It was the same kind of plant. And it lay there on the plant on its back, and it showed me its belly. And there were the diamonds of orderly precision, the very same pattern that had been in my dream, with the browns and the grays and the beiges. And I was so freaked out. My brain, I sometimes describe it as like trying to claw through straw with mittens on. Like I was trying to figure out, there's got to be an explanation for this. And I looked up and down the street, like for cameras, for like, is this some kind of like gag where they give you a dream? And then I didn't know what to think. And then I realized my toddler was alone in the house. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to look one more time and be sure. I did not imagine this. So I looked really close and I said, okay, it's the same pattern. And then I'm like, I guess whatever. And the spider turned over and like went back into the bush. And like it was holding its freaking belly for me to see until I really said, I see this. And so then I went back in the house. I didn't know what to make of it until almost a year later. Actually, this is going to be in the fall, and that was in the spring, so half a year later. I went to this friend's birthday party who lived clear across town for no reason. Sometimes you're on the freeway and you're like, why am I going here? I don't know. And I get there and no one else has a kid, and I feel like I don't belong. But then somebody starts talking about clairvoyant dreams. And so I'm like, oh, I had a clairvoyant dream once. And I tell the story and I say, it was just about pointless. It was just about a stupid spider, but it was weird. And then my friend said, no, 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 no. That was not just a spider. That was a spirit messenger. And then she said, isn't that about the time that you broke up with your partner? And I said, no, 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 that didn't happen for a couple months. But see, what it was the point of is when my partner betrayed me. It was when that affair began. Our threads parted, or that thread was cut. And so when I went home and I Googled spider spirit messenger, because she had read me a bunch of stuff about the threads being cut for an end of one thing in your life. But when I Googled it, it said, are you a writer who's not writing? The spider comes to tell you that you need to give your energy to yourself and write and create. And I just understood that it was, and I remembered it saying, I'm here for you. And so I just started bawling, and I felt the sky open up above me, and I could see the universe again. And I had the sense it goes on forever and ever above my head, and God is there. And I said, I know you're here always. I will never doubt you again. And I was just sobbing. And that's when I officially changed into, I felt like I had this shingle above the doorway of my mind, and it said Louisa Peck, atheist. And I took it down, I put up a new one, said Louisa Peck, woo woo. And like, that's what I am now, is I'm a woo woo. But I never changed again. I never went all the way back, but I would still sometimes doubt and sometimes go into skepticism. I still hadn't gone to ions. I still hadn't found anybody like me. So it seemed to me that I was saying, I'm so special. I have this voice I hear. I have this. So I'm driving up Olive Way in Seattle. And this is a trick that my angel played on me, on my critic, played a trick on my critic to kind of like snap that guy back once and for all. So I think, or he tells me, gonna see this friend of yours, Tim Smith. He's gonna be walking down the street, so keep your eye out. Hadn't seen Tim Smith for years. So I'm looking, oh boy, I think another of those weird things is gonna happen, and see Tim Smith. And there he is. He's coming down the right-hand side of the street, walking along. I'm like, oh my God, I saw Tim Smith. I can't believe I knew it. And then I look a little closer, and it's not actually Tim Smith. It's a guy who looks like Tim Smith. So then here goes my critic. Like, oh, Louisa, see, you could have just driven on and said, and then I saw Tim Smith, and you could like make this whole story about how you're so woo woo. And I bet you everything that's happened to you could be explained just as simply. And so it's kind of like, well, maybe. And then I look on the left, and here comes Tim Smith coming down the street.
That's so
And
funny.
this time it really is Tim Smith. And this time I honk and everything, and he's looking and stuff. And I go home and I Facebook him and I say, Tim, were you walking down the street here? And he's like, yeah, I was. I was on lunch from, and it's so cool to hear from you. I haven't heard from you in years. How are you doing? And so it was sort of like, I want to say that my angel sucker punched my critic.
Yeah.
Because my angel got my critic to come out and say, nee, 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 and then just, like, it's real,
Yeah.
mofo. Like, shut
Yeah.
up.
And I relate with that so much because even though I do this podcast and even though I'm a medium, I constantly that inner critic comes out and I like that. I think I've heard that before, but I haven't used it myself. And it is those moments where my spirit team is kind of, coming through to show me, Shannon, it's when are you going to just trust? When are you just going to stop with the, well, maybe I just got lucky. I'll have a great reading and I'll think that was really cool. But then I go back and I'm like, but what if they just wanted it to work? And what if they were just
Well,
trying to make it fit? And what
in,
if I just, yeah,
in some respects, I think we do need to always have breaks, because every now and then I will turn on a YouTube video of somebody who just does not rein in their what ifs at all.
right.
And like, I have some theories that I put together from interviewing a lot of other near death experiencers and my own experiences, but I don't just go and say, well, I'm from this other galaxy and I'm a
Yes.
star child and there's this other secret. I mean, I try to stay with what do I know. So I think it isn't bad to have breaks, to say, I'm not just going to say whatever I want to think is true, but it gets out of hand sometimes and it tries to undermine
I
what.
have was just having this conversation with one of my best friends this week, and she was saying she said, I watch a lot of these near death experiences and so forth, but so she said, I can't watch the ones where they're just all woo woo. And I said, I can't either. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can listen, but I always think it, I don't want to, and there's no judgment in it. It's just personally, it
Right.
doesn't resonate with me as much when
It
someone
doesn't
says,
resonate, and I'll have to
yeah,
admit that I have some judgment. I have
okay,
some,
yeah,
like, hey, person being interviewed, would you please just try to separate what you think
thank
might be true from what you have a strong basis for saying is true? And that's what
you.
I try to do. But I've gotten weirder and weirder. I mean, I've spoken more and more with my angel, and it's gotten back and forth, to the point where I've eventually asked him for a name, and he showed me some letters, and it ended up with Ignacio is his name. And there was another experience. I've had a lot of experiences with people seeing him. Well, not a lot. One experience with person seeing him, another with the camera. So one time I was at an AA meeting, and one of my sponsees had just been killed. She was a wonderful, wonderful person. And she was the kind of person who is so much themselves that they give you the freedom to be yourself. She was so spontaneous. And she was a welder, and she stood up from a welding job, and there was someone operating the crane without a spotter, and they dashed her brains out.
Oh,
She was 20, almost 26, about to turn 26. And I was at an AA meeting, and I stood up to talk about her. And I missed her so much. And just, I felt in some ways like she had annoyed some people in the meeting because she had a big personality. And I was just saying, like, if you can't see her with love, you didn't see her, because she was amazing. And after the meeting, this woman that I knew faintly came up to me, what young woman, and she said, this is going to sound really weird to you, but sometimes I see auras and spirits. And are you open to that? And I said, yeah, I am. And she said, you have a really powerful spirit. It travels to your left. And when you were talking about Vanessa, it got brighter and brighter. And like my love for Vanessa and the love that is in my angel were resonating together. And then I have these pictures that I've shown for a couple others. I've told about when I had breast cancer, and I had a party for my 18th sober birthday, but then it turned out that I was only going to have a lumpectomy, not a mastectomy. And this party was literally like 3 days before my surgery. And I, all kinds of people came out. I called it a get to keep my boob party. And tons of people came, and we were in the dining room right there. They were singing to me, and the whole room was full of people singing. Just, and I had this thought like, oh, Louisa, your siblings are right. We weren't getting along at that time. You know, you're such an egotist, and that's why you're a narcissist. That's why you have all these people come sing and make a big fuss over you. And I had this thought, I will never, never do this again. And then here comes my angel. And he's often amused with me. Like I can often feel him being like, you silly little human. But in my mind, he calls me little one. And he said, this is the whole point of life. Just let them love you. And I had to pull myself out of self-loathing and into a place of opening my heart to receive their love. And so people took pictures at that moment. This picture is taken with my camera
Wow,
right
that's
at the moment. And he's to my
incredible.
left. He's to my left. That's my ponytail holder in the middle, but he is the orb.
For
And then
anyone who's listening and can't see the visual, there's a beautiful big orb, not a dust particle. It is
and then
blue, and there is a little purple in the middle of it, and it's
that's my ponytail holder though.
oh
He's
yeah,
trying
that's
to
right. There, that's
so
okay. That's your pony.
this is a friend posted this on
Oh, I
Facebook.
see.
It's a I don't have as good a resolution,
I can see it. It's a
but
big
he's
blue
yeah.
orb right over her head that's sort of resting on her ponytail, but
And
it's
it's a moment
definitely
later, and he's moved and he's rotated.
oh,
So the features that you see in the one picture are still there, but they have moved slightly. And he's going. He came and he told me what he had to tell me, and then he's going. So I want to share another story though about Ignacio and his power and his determination that I not die yet, because I seem to want to kill myself a lot.
yeah.
Anyway, and he is saving me again. It's not like he said. So around this same time, there's a lot of turmoil in my life. I had published my addiction memoir. My siblings had reacted to it with hurt and fear, and I had had to shut them out of my life so that I could focus on recovering from cancer. And I went to an Al-Anon meeting on top of Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. Queen Anne Hill is one of the most dramatic hills in Seattle. It's 500 feet. And my route home from this church that was on top of Queen Anne Hill was down one of the steepest hills. It's called Dravis Avenue, and it just dropped straight down. And at the bottom of the hill is a bridge that goes over a 4-lane road. And so it's a very dense intersection and everything. So when I left the meeting, I took a right coming out of the driveway of the church and put on the brakes as I did that. Everything's normal. Then there's a turn in the road. And when I took that turn and I put on the brakes, they felt a little bit soft. What I didn't know was when I made that first turn and put on the brakes, a rubber hose in my brake system had broken because the car was 20 years old and it had cracked. And when I did that second brake, the fluid had poured out, had leaked out. So I had no brakes, but I did not know this. I had just felt it be a little bit soft. Okay. It's pouring down rain. And I'm very emotional because I've been at this meeting. And Ignacio says to me, you got to pull over now because you have no brakes. And I say to Ignacio, it's raining. I'm just going home. Ignacio says to me, you have no brakes. I say, I've got the handbrake. If anything goes wrong, I'll use the handbrake. I'm not pulling over. And so what does Ignacio do? The arterial is going to take a sharp turn to the right before I turned down Dravis. So I saw this sign on the left side of the road, and it said arterial turns, and it pointed to my right. And I thought, isn't that another block ahead? What is it here? And I'm confused, and it goes, just turn, just turn. And so I'm like, okay. And so I turned, thinking I must have lost track of time, and I got to the arterial sooner than I thought. I'm on this flat street. It's a little street I've never seen before. And I go to put on the brakes to stop, and there is nothing. There is absolutely nothing. And I slowly coast to a stop. And then once again, this is not the first time, I very sheepishly say to Ignacio, sorry, thank you. Because he literally took my thoughts. I went back later, and you know what I was looking at, Shannon? I was looking at the backside of a no parking sign. That's
Wow.
where I saw arterial turns. Why does he do this for me?
That's crazy.
I don't know why. But I mean, he's done it a lot of times. And I
And
I made a video recently about him in the mountains. I was hiking alone on the Pacific Crest Trail, and he said, "This is where you fall." And I've seen I mean, some near-death experiencers that I've talked to have talked about this kind of bifurcating path, that we do have free choice. We can choose different things. You know, we can choose to keep drinking and die. We can choose to get sober. I can choose to become a stewardess right now if I want. You know what? There are free choices. But Ignacio foresaw that I was very likely to fall and maybe die. It was a very, very steep trail that I was descending in this glacial cirque. And anyway, he says, this is where you fall. You have to go really, really slow. I'm like, okay, I'll be careful. And then he like kind of almost swears, like he doesn't swear, but he's like, no, I mean it. And so now I have learned, and I said, okay, how slow should I go? I will take these little baby steps. Is this okay? And he's like, it's okay. And so then I had a horrible spasm a little while later, and nerve pain. And I've told that story of how he healed me from that. I can tell it now if you want, or I don't know. You want to hear
sure.
that story?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, she's not tired. So this I'm had a terrible. So I was hiking section K of the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington, and it's 120 miles, and it's very difficult. It's got the most gain and loss of any in Washington. And so I came over this thing called Fire Creek Pass, and it was descending down towards Micah Lake when he warned me, and I believed him, and I walked slowly, and I stopped to take a picture, and then I was down climbing over this granite rock when I got this horrible pain in my knee. It was just horrible spasm. And so you're 60 miles from where you started and 60 miles to the next place. I just said, okay, that didn't happen. I'm just going to keep going. I'm kind of checking with Ignacio. Was that the thing you were talking about? And I don't get anything back. And then when I got to camp, I put my tent right next to Micah Lake, and I had a little twinge in the tent too. And I kind of was like, okay, this can't be happening because I'm in the middle of nowhere. It can't be happening. And these two British guys came and camped next to me. And I have to say that after being alone for as many days as I had, I was just filled with love for them. I just saw them as their childhood selves. I could hear them. Their tent was right next to mine, so I could hear them talking in their tent about what they were going to do tomorrow. And I was saying my prayers, and I was crying because I always cry when I'm saying my prayers, and I'm saying, you know, thank you for this beautiful life, and that I get to be sober, and I get to be here, and I'm loving these boys. So I get up in the morning, and I'm hiking along, and I'm loving the trees, and I just was filled with love for everything. And all of a sudden I get this terrible pain. And I tried praying. I was like, God, please, please, Ignacio, please, anybody help this pain. Would you please help it? I really need to finish. And I'd take another step and I'd have the same, it was like dentist level pain. It was so intense. And it was shooting down up from my knee and then also down my leg. And I looked up the mountain and I saw nobody. The British boys were long gone. There was nobody. And I'm in Glacier Peak Wilderness. It's gosh, it's like 500,000 acres of wilderness. And I said, I felt so alone. And I looked ahead and I saw this tree that was too big for how high we were. How high we were, everything was just a little scrubby, stunted thing, you know? And this was a real tree. And so I said, you are my other. And I went up to it and I was thinking of how it's a matriarch and how, if you've read The Hidden Life of Trees, trees communicate, they share resources, they have love for one another. And I put my forehead on the bark and I said, are you there? And she sent back, I am. And I just felt the energy, I am. And so then I said, you've been here for 1,000 years because of how big the tree was. And I said, can you ask God for me to heal me so I can keep going? And she sent back, each life must ask directly. And and then I was like, yeah, but see, I'm really like feel bad because I'm shy and and she just keeps going. Each life must ask directly. That, and it's getting fainter. And I realize that's all she's got for me. And what she's given me is something I already know, but I don't want to hear. And she's sending it back to me. So I gave her a kiss and everything. And I stepped down, tried to walk again. I got the pain. And so this time I just stopped. And the difference was that I emptied myself. And I said, I know I'm here because of vainglory. And I was thinking my big fat ego, but I said vainglory. Like that's why I was there alone. My friend had hurt her back. She couldn't go. I should have canceled. But I just said, I'm a badass. I'm going to go by myself. And I said, but you know how much I love this. And you know how much I want to finish. Please, can you give me some guidance? And as soon as I said guidance, instead of fix it, all this information poured in. So I will try to tell it fast because it's a multi-layered thing.
Sure.
But the first thing he told me was that I had pulled my inner thigh muscle, and that was pulling my leg out of alignment, the bones out of alignment. So I was hitting a nerve in my knee. And he said, you need to put it up on a rock every 200 feet and stretch it. And then he said, you need to take your trekking pole. And he flashes me to when I was at the physical therapist for a different thing, and the physical therapist used to have me kneel on this little stuffed thing, and he said, you're going to use your trekking pole the same way and put pressure on that same point, and then I'll tell you more later. So he's like, then I'm doing this and I'm not having the spasm and I'm going along. And then he goes, do you know that little piece of Velcro? Well, first he goes, do you remember when you were at the physical therapist and you were talking about kinesthetic tape? And he said, and I remember where we were by this mat and everything. He brings the scene back to me. And the physical therapist said, no one really knows why kinesthetic tape works. We theorize that it signals the brain to send more resources there. And Ignacio goes, you know that little piece of Velcro that you found in your pack and you had no idea how it got there? I'm like, yes, because I threw it on the don't bring pile. I'm always trying to go lighter. And then I found it in my pack. And he's like, put that on and that will be my beacon and I will heal you. And I'm like, you can't heal me. I mean, what are you talking about? And he was all super happy. He's like, no, little one, you're going to finish this thing. And I'm like, well, okay. So I stopped and I found the Velcro and I put it on my knee and I just could not believe. Then he's like, okay, you only need to stop every 500 feet. You only need to stop every 1,000. You don't need to stop anymore. And I walked 60 miles and I never had any more pain. And in fact, because I had to go around the fire, there was one day that I walked 23 miles in one day. And
That's a lot of miles.
my knee was
I one time walked 8 miles by accident, and I had plantar fasciitis for months.
Well,
Pretty awful.
I was carrying almost 30 pounds too on my back.
Yeah.
So he loves me. And there's another time, one time when my dad was dying and I was excited about the light. And then I prayed to him and I said, "Oh, Ignacio, I suck so bad. I can't believe my dad is dying and I'm excited about the light." And he laughed. He said, "You're human. It comes with the package." And he loves me like I'm a little toddler. I like to say I had like the mashed yams of ego all over my face, and I'm going like, "Am I bad?" And
Right.
he's saying, "No, you're not bad. You're human."
I do you call on him a lot? Like, do you actually intentionally reach out to him, or do you
All the
sort of wait
time.
for him? Yeah.
All the time. Yeah, no, I asked him before I did this. I said, "Will you help me know what to say?" So
Yeah.
he does.
Yeah,
And
I did a little prayer too, and I never do before my interviews. I just felt like I just said, "Spirit, support us in
Mhm.
whatever comes to light is just meant to be spoken, meant to be heard." Not that I feel like I needed that, but for some reason I just felt compelled to ask, which is funny.
Always good to ask, you know.
Yeah.
And I
And
don't
they
always
always go
feel
well, but
I don't
yeah.
always feel I get a direct connection, but I know he always hears me whether I get something back or not. But
Right.
I do want to say that I do these interviews because I honestly feel like our culture, with the Enlightenment, all that stuff my dad was into, threw out the baby with the bathwater. Like,
Yeah.
religion is a cultural thing. It doesn't really fit us anymore, but that God is an energy and God is a reality. And just because our science has not evolved to the point where we can understand what kind of energy it is, it's what's animating us. Ask a scientist, what's the difference between this bird that is alive and this bird that is dead? They can't really tell you. You know, something is gone. That is the spark of God that is in us. And one day we will understand what it is, but we don't yet. And it is very hard to live in a world where you don't feel there is a loving God. And to quote even Alexander, he said, "Without reincarnation, there is no such thing as a loving God." Like, it's not like you get one shot and you're done. You live again and again and you give it your best each time and you hopefully do a little better each time.
I think that's so beautiful. I could talk to you for hours, but I actually want to end it there just because it's such a beautiful place to end. And also, you're writing a book, and there's so much more for you to share that I know you'll pour into this book.
For sure.
So I look forward to reading it when the time comes, no pressure. And I know you have so much to share, but I think that's so beautiful. And it is just a reminder that I think so many people who have near death experiences, it's not so, it's, they come back with these stronger abilities to sense spirit, hear spirit in the way that you do with your angels, where we all have angels. Not everybody really recognizes when their angels are speaking with them. And
Mhm.
I think that's because it's not that you were given something you didn't have before. You were just reminded of where you came from, and you were reminded of that energy body, and you were reminded of the ability to communicate with beings that are not of this earth, or they are of this earth, but they're in another dimension, or however you want to look at it. But I think that's what's so beautiful, and why I love to do this too, is to remind people, because it is it can be a dark place being here. There's a lot of dark stuff that happens. And I think that by you sharing your story, you remind people that that light never leaves us, even when bad things happen, even when we suffer, that be reawakening to our spirit selves is so important for our growth, but also to help us cope with those things, and to remind ourselves that this is happening right now, but in the end everything's okay.
Mhm.
Everything, in no matter what happens here, it's not the end, and that
Mhm.
everything's okay. It may not feel like it right now, and it might hurt,
Yeah. Yeah, for
but
sure.
it's all good. And I know that, not I say that not to minimize pain, but just to acknowledge that there is no end. It's just
Mhm.
another chapter and another learning and another evolution. So,
Mhm.
is there, I just want to ask you one last thing, which is you just kind of said it, but if there's one thing that you want people to know, what would that be?
Just that they are love. That's it.
Yeah, that's simple and beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here, sharing your energy, your light, your loving energy, and also just your insight. It really does mean the world.
Well, thanks. It's been super fun.
It's been very fun. And I just am going to throw in one last thing about the podcast. If you liked this podcast and this interview and you want to hear more like it, please like, subscribe, share with like minded friends, and
Can I
comment
say
below.
one more
Yeah,
thing? Don't
please
buy
do.
my book unless, don't buy this book on alcoholism unless you want to read about alcoholism. I'm writing one now that's going to be about my NDE, but it's the other one is like 90% alcoholism, 10% NDE.
I want to read that one too. So
Okay.
I'm going to, but thank you for clarifying that just so people know what they're reading. And is there anything else also coming up for you that you'd like to share?
No, just the
Okay.
book.
Just wanted to make sure I'll have all of Louisa's information below. And again, thank you so much for being here and for coming with an open heart and mind.
Thank you, Shannon, for having me.
Thank you.